It's the beginning of a new era for Georgia Tech, but with a brand new offense, how will they fare in 2019? Find out here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.
Paul Johnson and his spread offense is out, and Geoff Collins and his new pro-style offense is in. It's going to be a brand new look for Georgia Tech in 2019, and because of these major changes, people are automatically marking Georgia Tech as last in the ACC Coastal. But as the great Lee Corso says, not so fast. I'm here to tell you that Georgia Tech will be much more competitive than people are giving them credit for in 2019. And before we begin, I want to give a shout out to my man, Lane White. You know, we do a lot of predictions and a lot of work for these predictions here, but Lane White took the liberty of doing some research on his own, an avid Georgia Tech fan, gave me a lot of info and a lot of insight that I probably wasn't going to be able to get anywhere else, and it was able to benefit us on this Georgia Tech prediction. So Lane, we appreciate your help, we appreciate your insight, and it did benefit us when we did this Georgia Tech prediction. So, on offense, the Yellow Jackets return 5 starters. On defense, they return 4 starters. But does any of that matter? With a brand new scheme on offense and a brand new scheme on defense, do these starters mean much for the Yellow Jackets? On offense, they will be using quarterback Lucas Johnson, who was out with an injury last year and probably wouldn't have played anyways last year as they were still running that option. But Johnson is the right man for the job for Geoff Collins' pro-style offense. It's going to benefit Georgia Tech in a big way. Johnson played a pro-style offense in high school, and even though he hasn't seen much action on the field at Georgia Tech, he will be seeing it a lot this year. He is the right man for the job. They bring back Jerry Howard and Jordan Mason at running back or at tailback, and that's going to be the key for Georgia Tech. You know, they played a lot last year under that option offense. They got a lot of yards, and that's going to benefit them on this offense. If Lucas Johnson struggles, they can rely on 2 running backs that know the system and had plenty of playing experience last year. So that's going to be huge for them. On defense, they allowed 29.3 points per game last year. The secondary is absolutely going to be the strength for Georgia Tech, and as we know, Geoff Collins is a defensive-minded coach and knows how to coach his cornerbacks. Let's see if he can do it in 2019 and shock the ACC a little bit. Unfortunately, they open up against the defending national champions in Clemson, and I can tell you right now, that's going to be a loss. That's a horrible, horrible way for a brand new head coach and a brand new offense to open up the season. Going up against a Clemson team that arguably will have the best offense in the entire nation, led by Trevor Lawrence, arguably the best quarterback in the nation and possibly the best wide receiver core in the nation. It's also on the road at Death Valley on a Thursday night. None of this adds up and none of this lines up for a good opening to the Geoff Collins era. They take a loss to Clemson, but the Yellow Jacket fans shouldn't worry. I don't see anybody beating Clemson in the regular season this year. They come back home to face off against South Florida, and this is a bit of a revenge game for Georgia Tech. They lost that game on the road 49-38 last year, an absolute shootout. And if their special teams had played a little bit better, then maybe they would have been able to beat South Florida. But this is a revenge game in my opinion. South Florida, led by Charlie Strong, led by one of the most experienced teams in the American Athletic Conference, the AAC. I do see this as a potential trap game. Georgia Tech may be starting off 0-2, but with revenge on their mind, with them getting a very solid experience game against the reigning national champs, I think they come back and beat South Florida, getting revenge on Charlie Strong and the Bulls. They beat the Citadel, no problem. They're 2-1 going into a bye week against Temple. And why is this an intriguing game? Well, this is because this is Geoff Collins' previous school. He used to coach the Temple Owls just as recently as last year before coming to take the job with Georgia Tech. So it's not very often that a brand new head coach faces his previous team the year after he leaves them. But they go on the road to Temple, of all places. So you know it's going to be a very very strong welcome for Geoff Collins when he visits the Owls. But I think Georgia Tech gets the win here. Temple, of course, going to be under new management as well, bringing in Rod Carey over from Northern Illinois. But Georgia Tech, with a week of rest and maybe this offense finally trying to figure things out, probably working out any issues they have, I think they go on the road and defeat another American Athletic Conference foe in Temple. And they're 3-1. And if you look at this schedule, they have to start strong. If Georgia Tech wants to make a bowl game, they have to start strong in the early half of the schedule because the second half is absolutely brutal. They come back home after that win over Temple to face off against North Carolina, a team that will also have a brand new head coach in Mack Brown, a team that I also think could struggle mightily in 2019. A lot of people have North Carolina picked ahead of Georgia Tech in the standings. They think North Carolina could very well make a bowl game because they returned 14 starters and because they were competitive last year. They were 2-9, but were competitive in a lot of those games. And while I do agree with that, you can't deny that, I do think North Carolina is going to struggle a lot more than Georgia Tech this season. This game's at home for the Yellow Jackets in Atlanta, and they get a win over the Tar Heels. It would be Geoff Collins' first ACC victory in his tenure with the Yellow Jackets. So it's going to be a huge win and a huge moment for them. They are 4-1 going into the game at Duke and entering the second week of October. So things will be trending up for Georgia Tech. But as I mentioned, the schedule gets much tougher. They go on the road against Duke, a team that loses their star quarterback in Daniel Jones, a team that will be borderline bowl eligible in 2019, depending on the job that David Cutcliffe can do and depending on how quickly, like Georgia Tech, this offense can figure everything out. They lose Daniel Jones. They bring in Quentin Harris. They lose some of their star wide receivers. I think their top 4 wide receivers they lose. So Duke could struggle on the offensive side of the ball, but the Duke defense is what's going to give them the edge in this game. It is on the road. Home field advantage will play a major role, but this Duke secondary going up against a somewhat inexperienced offense that will be throwing the ball a lot more at Georgia Tech, Duke gets a big-time win over the Yellow Jackets, and Georgia Tech falls for their second loss of the season. They go on the road to face Miami, and this is going to be another loss because if you thought the Duke's defense was just decent, Miami's defense is going to look absolutely elite. On the road against Miami, not an easy place to play at all. Miami's defense will once again be one of the best in the nation now that Manny Diaz is their head coach. For the past couple years, their defense was elite, but the offense could never get anything going. That will change with Tate Martell at quarterback and Dan Enos as the offensive coordinator. Georgia Tech will lose on the road to Miami, a team that could very well win the ACC Coastal this year and become relevant not just in the conference, but on the national stage. So Georgia Tech drops their second straight game in ACC play. They get a bye week coming back home to face off against Pittsburgh, and they lost to Pittsburgh last year. This was a Georgia Tech team that did make a bowl game before getting blown out by Minnesota, but did make a bowl game, but lost to Pittsburgh 24-19 on the road. But Georgia Tech comes off a week of rest here, and if you've been watching these predictions, you know how big a bye week is, in my opinion, how much that can do for a team. They work it out after 2 losses. Geoff Collins is not going to let that stuff slide. They get a week to fix any issues they have, going up against a Pittsburgh team that I think will struggle offensively as well now that they've lost their top 2 rushers in Darren Hall and Quadre Olison. Kenny Pickett is a quarterback that I do not think is elite. I don't even think he's average. I think he's a little bit below average. Maybe he can take some major steps forward in 2019. I don't think that's the case. A week of rest, home field advantage. Georgia Tech gets a big-time win, their 5th of the season, over the Pittsburgh Panthers. But I mentioned that second half of the schedule, starting with this Duke game, gets very difficult, especially the last third of the season at Virginia, Virginia Tech, North Carolina State, and Georgia. We'll start with Virginia, a team that, like Miami, could very well win the ACC Coastal this year, and they have their sights set on it. They should have won it last year. They got beat by Pittsburgh at home by 10 points. Had they won that game, they probably would have won the Coastal. The Panthers, of course, went on to get annihilated by Clemson in the ACC title game. Virginia returns Bryce Perkins, one of the most dangerous dual-threat quarterbacks in the ACC, one of the top quarterbacks in the ACC. And a lot of people don't know it, but Virginia will boast one of the best defenses, not just in the conference, but in the entire nation, especially in that secondary. Georgia Tech got the best of the Cavaliers last year, 30-27, a game that Virginia should have won. This year they get their revenge. Virginia takes care of the Yellow Jackets, I think, fairly easily in this one. Georgia Tech drops a game to the Cavaliers, who between them and Miami will probably be the top 2 contenders in the ACC Coastal. They come back home to face off against Virginia Tech. Last year, Georgia Tech beat the Hokies by 21 on the road. And we know playing on the road against Virginia Tech is not easy whatsoever. But last year was a completely different Virginia Tech team. Last year was a different Georgia Tech team because they were running a completely different offense. But Virginia Tech returns 10 starters on the defensive side of the ball. And I stress that so much because they're dealing with one of the best defensive coordinators in the game with Bud Foster. This defense will take major strides forward. Ryan Willis did a phenomenal job last year taking over for Josh Jackson. Imagine what he's going to do this year. Now he's got a whole offseason under his belt. This offense is going to thrive for Virginia Tech this year. A major bounce-back year for the Hokies. Even though it's at Georgia Tech, the Hokies get the win over the Yellow Jackets, and it's another loss for Geoff Collins and the Yellow Jackets. They just have 2 games remaining on the schedule. They have to win one of them to get to a bowl game. Luckily for them, both of them are at home. This game against North Carolina State is the one that I could see clinching bowl eligibility for the Yellow Jackets. It's very possible it could happen, but I'm not predicting it to. I think they fall to the Wolfpack. Yes, they lose Ryan Finley. Yes, they lose Reggie Gillespie. Yes, they lose their top 2 wide receivers. The offense could struggle. But Dave Doran continues to surprise me year in and year out with the job that he does with the Wolfpack. And I think that Matt McKay and this offense by November 21st will have figured things out. So while this game will be in Atlanta, this defense, which will be the strength for the Wolfpack, returning 7 starters, will be the key in this win over Georgia Tech. North Carolina State, I've predicted them to do poorly before because of losses on the defensive side of the ball or the offensive side of the ball, and they always end up proving me wrong. I think they do that this year as well, and North Carolina State comes on the road and defeats the Yellow Jackets. They close out the year, of course, in their annual rivalry against Georgia. The Bulldogs, big-time contenders in the SEC, big-time contenders on the national stage, college football playoff contenders, no doubt. The past 2 years against Georgia Tech, the Bulldogs have outscored them 83-28. To make things a little bit worse, Georgia Tech has only beaten Georgia 3 times since 2001. It will not be a win in 2019. Despite them hosting the Bulldogs in Atlanta, Georgia will absolutely be too much. If you thought Geoff Collins was a defensive coach, you haven't seen anything when Kirby Smart's defense rolls into town. Kirby Smart, one of the best defensive coordinator or best defensive-minded coaches in the entire game. They returned Jake Fromm at the quarterback position, one of the best in the SEC. They have probably the best running back core in the SEC. It might get brutal in Atlanta in year 1 under Geoff Collins. They fall to the Bulldogs, and I know that's 4 straight losses to close out the year, but you heard me say how difficult that schedule is, and I truly mean it. Year 1 for Geoff Collins, 5-7, and I got to say that is something that I don't think many people will see coming. I know Georgia Tech faithful hope they're going to make a bowl game, could see them winning 6, 7, maybe even 8 games. But 5-7 is better than most analysts out there are predicting, saying that they're going to go maybe 2-10 or 3-9. But I have a lot of faith in Geoff Collins. I think this offense catches some teams by surprise. I think they take major strides forward quicker than people are expecting. Georgia Tech is 1 upset away from bowl eligibility in year 1 under Geoff Collins. And imagine what they're going to do in year 2 with 2 years under their belt with this brand new offense. So guys, as always, thank you for watching us here. Go check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Gridiron Expert, and go check out our website, thegridironexpert.com. Sign up for our newsletter, check out our videos, or sign up for our expert picks. For just $30, you will get every single one of our 2019 college football spread picks. That also includes our postseason spread picks. We've had countless others sign up, so why don't you guys go ahead and sign up today? It's an opportunity and a deal that not even the smallest college football fan can pass up. So join the team, sign up today. And guys, as always, thank you for watching us here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you next time here on The Gridiron Expert.